bells were still ringing when Jon saw the dragon's shadow swallow the square. It rolled across the broken cobbles and the bodies and the dropped swords, a moving night that made every man beneath it flinch and duck. The air was thick with smoke and the copper taste of blood. Somewhere a horse screamed and would not stop. Jon pushed through the crush of Lannister men throwing down their weapons, of Northerners and Unsullied tangled in the bewildered standstill that came when a battle died too quickly. The bells pealed and pealed, crying surrender. The city had yielded. It was over. Above, Drogon hovered, beating the sky with his wings, banking in a wide circle over the red roofs of King's Landing. Jon could see the queen on his back, a small dark shape with pale hair streaming out behind her like a comet's tail. Even from the ground he could feel something from her, like a heat that wasn't fire, a ferocity that vibrated through the dragon into the air itself. "Back!" someone shouted in the press. "Get back! Get under cover!" Jon barely heard. His eyes were fixed on the dragon. Drogon's head swung toward the streets leading deeper into the city, toward Flea Bottom and the packed alleys where the small folk were still screaming and running like ants in a kicked nest. Jon saw the way the dragon's hindquarters bunched, the way his chest swelled. "He's going to..." "Daenerys," Jon whispered, though she could not hear him. "Don't." A coil of rage and dread twisted inside him. The bells rang like pleading hands. Drogon's black throat glowed red. "No," Jon said louder. "No!" Something in him broke. He shoved aside a gawking Northerner, stepped into the open, and looked up into the dragon's vast, unblinking eye as it wheeled overhead. His voice tore out of him in words he did not remember knowing until he spoke them, the harsh flowing syllables of a language he'd been told was dead. "Drogon!" he shouted in high Valyrian, his throat raw. "Lakiri, stand down." The word left his mouth like a thrown spear. Calm. For an instant nothing changed. The dragon's chest was a furnace, the light inside his throat blinding. Jon squinted against it, then Drogon's head jerked mid-breath. The blaze that had been coiling at the back of his jaw sputtered, choking against his teeth. The dragon gagged, the glow dimming. His wings beat once, twice, in an uneven rhythm as his immense body twisted in the air, as if fighting itself. Up on the dragon's back, the queen moved. Even from below, Jon could see her turn, see the line of her shoulders stiffen as she looked down, seeking the source of the voice that had dared to command her child. For a heartbeat, dragon and rider were at cross purposes. Drogon's pupils, vast and narrow both at once, snapped away from the city and locked onto the square where Jon stood. Recognition flared in that molten gaze. Smoke swirled, dragging ash and scraps of burning parchment through the air. Drogon banked hard, abandoning the line of flight that would have taken his fire over the crowded streets. His wings heaved against the wind as he dipped, slanting toward Jon instead of the city. The bells kept ringing. Jon's heart hammered so loud he could hardly hear anything else. He felt the heat of the dragon's breath wash over him as Drogon swept low. Men scattered, fell to their knees, threw themselves against walls. Jon did not move. He held that inhuman gaze and felt, absurdly, as if he were back in the gods' wood at Winterfell, staring into the red eyes of the weirwood tree that saw everything and judged nothing. Drogon roared, a sound thick with frustration and something like pain, and flared his wings. The wind of it knocked men off their feet. He did not breathe fire. He came to ground at the edge of the square in a thunder of claws on stone, talons cracking cobbles, tail whipping like a living battering ram. His bulk filled Jon's world. On his back, the queen swore in the same harsh tongue Jon had used, words like broken glass. "What are you doing?" she shouted at the dragon. "Dracarys." "I said Dracarys." Drogon's head swung between city and man, arguing with himself in the only way he knew. His nostrils leaked thin streams of smoke. Firelight pulsed behind his teeth. He took one step toward the city, then another toward Jon, the ground trembling under each indecision. Jon took a breath that tasted of cinders and fear. He spoke again, though his knees were shaking. "Look at me," he said, still in that ancient language. "At me, not at them. Switi Nike. With me, Drogon." The dragon's pupils slit even thinner. He lowered his head until his eye was level with Jon, until Jon could see his own soot-streaked face reflected in the black gold surface. Heat poured off him in waves that turned the air to a shimmering curtain. The queen leaned forward, clutching a ridge of black scales. Her hair was in wild disarray, her face streaked with soot and something like tears. "Aegon!" she cried, the name still strange on her tongue. She spat it like a curse. "Get away from him. You don't command him." "I do. I am his mother, Her voice faltered at the word. Mother. She sounded like a child herself, outraged, disbelieving. Drogon made a soft, rumbling noise deep in his chest. It was almost a purr, if a mountain could purr. Around them, silence fell in ragged patches. Men who had been shouting and sobbing and praying a moment before now watched with mouths hanging open. The bells continued their desperate clang from the belfries, but here in the square they seemed far away, like some memory of a kinder day. Jon lifted a hand. His fingers trembled. He thought of the first time he had laid a hand on Regal's warm scales in the cold air above the wall, heart leaping with terror and wild joy. He thought of how the dragon had accepted his weight, his touch, as if it were naturality. At a dead prince's son should sit astride a beast from legend. He set his palm against Drogon's snout. The dragon's skin was hot as a forge, rough and smooth all at once. Under the surface, muscles bunched and shifted like ropes. Drogon blinked, a second lid sliding over his eye and back. His rumble deepened, rolled through Jon's bones. "Aegon?" Daenerys repeated, softer now, and in that one word was hurt that went down to the roots of her. "Don't." Jon looked up at her, so close, just a few man-heights above him, yet as distant as the stars. Her eyes were wide, luminous with smoke and fury. She looked like everything he had loved and everything he feared, all at once. "The city has yielded," he said. "They've rung the bells. It's done. You won." "I haven't won," she said bitterly. "Not while lions still draw breath. Not while the men who killed my father, my mother, my brother's children, walk this earth and die in their beds. Not while they think they can betray me and live." Her gaze cut across the square, to where Lannister soldiers knelt with hands on their heads, faces pale, eyes haunted. Some of them were little more than boys. "Look at them," Jon said. His hand remained on Drogon's head. He could feel the dragon's attention, the way it flickered between the two humans he was caught between. "They surrendered. They're done fighting. This isn't," he almost said, "this isn't you." But he remembered the burning of the slavers at Meereen, the crucified masters along their roads, the men of the Dothraki screaming applause as bodies blackened. He remembered Viserys, crown of molten gold. He stopped with the words choking him. "It's not right," he said instead. Her lips parted. For a flicker she was silent, and in that gap Jon dared hope. He saw something move behind her eyes, a ghost of the girl Tyrion had told him about, a girl who had walked barefoot through hot sand with nothing but a brother's cruelty and a dream of a home she had never seen. Then the specter was gone. "You will not tell me what is right," Daenerys said, and her voice was cold as the wall in midwinter. "Not you. Not when you have their blood in your veins. Not when you stand there with my dragon under your hand. And he..." Her gaze dropped to the place where Jon's fingers touched Drogon's snout. Her face twisted. "Drogon," she said sharply, voice rising. "Elope. Fly." The dragon's head jerked again. For a moment Jon felt the pressure of another will bearing down on the beast, not with words but with sheer intensity. Commander, mother, queen. It was all the same to her now. The force of her need hit Drogon like a hammer. Fire flared in Drogon's throat once more. His chest heaved. Jon tasted fear like iron. If Drogon took flight now, if he broke free in panic and rage, the city would burn. The queen would burn it. She would not stop at soldiers. She would not distinguish. He leaned his forehead against the dragon's snout, closing his eyes for an instant. Please, he thought, though he didn't know if he was addressing the beast or the gods or whatever strange blood in his own veins had made this moment possible. Please, not them. Take me if you need to, but not them. He felt the dragon's breath on his face, hot and fierce, a wind that smelled of smoke and salt and the open sky. There was something in it, some vast simple feeling that had no words. Affection, maybe, or recognition. If dragons loved at all, this was what it was. Drogon huffed. Then, slowly, deliberately, he turned his head away from the city. The bell towers, the crowded streets, the Red Keep. They all fell out of his direct sight. The fire pulsing behind his teeth receded a fraction. He exhaled it as mere heat, a blast of scorching air that flattened banners and made the men nearest him stagger back, clutching their faces. Daenerys swayed on his back. Drogon, she whispered, as if the name had been knocked out of her. No, no, look at me. To me, do you hear? Azantes, come to me. But Drogon's neck curved, bringing his head down further until Jon stood between his massive jawbones, between the curved ridges of his horns like some strange priest at an altar of flesh. Jon stepped closer, ignoring the way his boots slipped on melted stone. It's done, Jon said, more to the queen now than to the dragon. It's over. Call off the soldiers. We can talk after. We can. We? She cut in. You mean you and your sisters. You and your lords of the north, with their cold eyes and colder hearts. You want me docile before their judgment, after they told me to trust you, and you told them the one thing that could destroy me. You told them who you are. Her words were knives. Each one found a place already bleeding. That wasn't to destroy you, Jon said. I swore to you. I tried to make them see we could follow you, that we must. But they've seen what fire does. They remember my grandfather in his armor, how men roasted in it. And I remember mine, she snapped. What they did to him, to my brother's children. Don't talk to me of roasting, Aegon, son of Rhaegar. There were eyes on them now, so many eyes. Northerners in their leathers and mail, sweating in the southern heat. Unsullied with shields at their sides, small round faces impassive. Dothraki sitting their horses like carved knots of leather and sinew, their braids rattling with bells. Lannister men, beaten and broken, watched their fate balanced above them on the knife edge of one woman's will and one dragon's choice. Your Grace, Tyrion's voice carried thinly from the edge of the square. He had pushed forward, Davos at his shoulder, both of them breathing hard from the effort of getting through the press of bodies. Please, the city is yours. Let that be enough. She did not look at him. Her eyes were locked on Jon. You stand there, she said slowly, as if each word hurt, with my dragon under your hand, and you ask me for mercy, as if you do not know what mercy cost me in Meereen, in Yunkai, in Astapor. Each time I spared those who would have chained me, sold me, killed me, more suffered. Here, in this place, I will not pay that price again. Then it's me you want, Jon said. Not them. Say it plain. Her chin lifted. Ash drifted around her like black snow. Behind her, the Red Keep loomed, its walls scorched and scarred by dragon fire. She looked as if she had grown out of it, a flame given human shape. You are a threat, she said. You are a man with my house's name and my house's face, and they whisper behind your back. They look at you when they speak of the future, not at me. My rule will never be secure while you live. You know this. I know this. Jon swallowed. Something in his chest tightened, then steadied. If taking my head will spare them, he said, take it, but don't burn them. Don't burn children for what I am. Her eyes flashed. You think this is one life for thousands? This isn't about numbers, Jon. This is about fear. They must fear me or they will never be loyal. Love is fragile. We've both seen that. Fear endures. She said it as if quoting some old, bitter lesson. Jon's fingers curled against Drogon's scales. The dragon's rumble shifted, unease crawling through it like distant thunder. You're becoming what they said your father was, Jon said quietly. What my grandfather fought. Her face went white beneath the soot. For a moment he thought she would scream. Instead she smiled. It was a terrible thing, brittle and bright. If I am, she said, then you are what my brother was, the usurper they dressed up in honor. I see it now. I should have seen it sooner. She raised one hand and pointed down at him, at the man standing between her and the ground, between her and the city. Drogon, she said. Her voice rang like steel on stone. Kill him. The world narrowed. Jon heard Tyrion suck in a breath somewhere behind him. Davos murmured a sharp prayer under his breath. There was a ripple through the ranks of onlookers, a sucking tide of inhaled horror. Drogon's head reared back instinctively, jaws parting. The glow flared at the back of his throat. Jon didn't move. He could have run, dived, thrown himself aside and let the dragon's fire take some other path. He didn't. There was nowhere he wanted to go that this choice would not follow him. He looked up into Drogon's eyes. Don't, he whispered. Not in Valyrian now, just in the plain tongue of the north. Not for her, not for me. Time slowed. The heat of the dragon's breath washed over him like the opening of a furnace door. Sparks danced from between Drogon's teeth. Behind him, he heard metal ring as someone dropped a sword. Heard a Dothraki horse rear, screaming. Heard Arya's voice in his memory, you know nothing, and Sam's anxious laugh, and his father's voice, Ned's voice, telling him that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword. He had done that beyond the wall. He had killed men who betrayed him and died for it. He had taken no joy in it. He had come back, and the world had not grown kinder. Drogon's pupils dilated. The fire in his throat pulsed, desperate to be loosed. He didn't breathe. He closed his mouth. The sudden absence of expected flame was like a punch to the senses. Jon blinked, blinded not by light but by the lack of it. Heat still roared from the dragon's nostrils, turned the square into a kiln, but it did not become fire. Drogon made a sound Jon had never heard from him before. A low, drawn-out keen, almost feline, almost human. It was the sound of something large and dangerous refusing its own nature. His head dropped again, jaw nearly touching the ground, bringing Jon entirely within the arch of his skull. Daenerys stared down, disbelief giving way to something raw and wounded. Drogon, she said, and now her voice shook. What are you doing? Obey me. Obey me. But Drogon's attention was fixed on Jon. His nostrils flared, drinking in Jon's scent. Smoke swirled between them. Jon could smell singed hair, charred leather, the city burning in small ways all around them. He knew suddenly, in the marrow of him, that if he asked Drogon to leap, the dragon would. If he swung himself up onto that neck, Drogon would take his weight, would answer his hand on scale and spine. He has chosen, he thought with a kind of dazed horror. Drogon, he said, forcing the word out past a throat gone tight. With me. He hesitated, then added, in the old tongue that came so strangely easily now, Syt Nike. For me. The dragon's great eye-slitted almost closed in what might, on a smaller creature, have been contentment. He shifted his bulk closer, so close that Jon had to step back or be nudged by a horn the size of a spear. Jon stumbled, caught himself against the dragon's jaw. Gasps rippled through the watching crowd. On Drogon's back, the queen swayed again. She looked as if someone had reached into her chest and torn something vital out with their bare hands. He's mine, she whispered. Jon wasn't sure anyone else heard her. My son, my last son. You can't. Her voice broke. A wild wind swept across the square as another shadow passed over. Jon looked up, heart lurching, and saw Regal descending through the smoke. The green dragon's wings were ragged from the battle at Winterfell, one hind leg still bearing a scar where an undead monster had torn at him. He flew more stiffly than his brother, but there was still lethal grace in him as he came down, claws skidding on stone not far from Drogon. Regal's head turned between queen and man and dragon, eyes meeting Jon's for a heartbeat with an old familiarity. Jon remembered clinging to that neck above the frozen lakes of the far north. the feel of icy air ripping tears from his eyes, the taste of fear and freedom. Rhaegal had accepted him, too, had carried him. For an instant, Jon thought he would make the same choice Drogon had. Then Daenerys made a sound that startled even the dragons. It was not a word at first, just a hoarse, strangled noise. She tore herself from Drogon's back, half sliding, half falling, grabbing only enough of his spines to keep from breaking her neck on the ground. She landed badly, one knee hitting stone hard enough that Jon flinched in sympathetic pain. She pushed herself up with hands scraped raw. She limped toward Rhaegal. The green dragon lowered his head at her approach, his breath whistling through his teeth. She pressed both hands to his snout, fingers digging between scales. "You'll listen," she whispered. Jon could see the whites of her eyes, stark through streaks of soot and ash. "You'll obey. You remember him. You carried him. But you are mine. You are my child. I am the blood of the dragon." Rhaegal rumbled, a sound less conflicted than his brother's. His pupils narrowed, fixing on Jon for a moment, then swinging back to the queen. He exhaled, a warm gust that tossed her hair. Behind Jon, Grey Worm stepped into the open, spear in hand, armor smudged and dented. His face betrayed nothing, as always, but his eyes were hard as obsidian as they rested on Jon. "Your Grace," he called. "Say the word." The square was one breath from slaughter. Tyrion moved forward again, hand raised as if he could physically hold back the tide. His voice, when it came, was rough with what he did not say. "Daenerys, please, look around. The city has seen enough fire for 10 lifetimes. If you unleash them, if I do nothing," she snapped, "they will whisper of this betrayal until it devours me, until my dragon, my Drogon, is stolen from me entirely, until another false king sits the throne my family forged. I will not let my father's killers win by their son's hands." She whirled on Jon. "This is treason," she said, each syllable ringing. "You stood where they could see you and you took him from me. I didn't take. They will say you did," she said. "They will say the dragon chose you, that the realm should too. They will say your name, not mine, when they drink to the king. I know how stories grow. It doesn't have to be like that," Jon said. He could feel the eyes of the Northerners behind him, the way their posture had shifted when Drogon moved. They were looking at him differently already. It made his skin crawl. "We can rule together?" she mocked. "Sit side by side on a throne built for one? Share power like bread? It never lasts, Jon. You know this. One will always be stronger. One will always be loved more. The other will break." Her fingers tightened on Rhaegal's scales. The dragon answered with a low growl. "You've made your choice," she said. "So must I." She scrambled up Rhaegal's side, finding purchase between his plates of armor-like skin. It was not the easy, practiced movement she had with Drogon. There was an awkwardness to it, a desperation. Twice she slipped, catching herself only by dint of sheer stubbornness. At last she threw a leg over and hauled herself onto his back, breathing hard. Rhaegal shifted, adjusting to her weight. He spread his wings. For a heartbeat, Jon thought she meant to attack then and there, to finish what she had started, to send Rhaegal's flame across the square, engulf Northman and Lannister and Unsullied indiscriminately. He tensed, feeling Drogon tense with him. But Daenerys Targaryen, blood of the dragon, had always been more patient than her brother. Rhaegal leapt, wings beating hard. Wind blasted across the ruined square. The green dragon shot up into the smoky sky, climbing rapidly, circling once over the city that had surrendered and yet had not burned as she wished. From Rhaegal's back, the queen looked down. Her eyes found Jon's, as sharp and sure as an arrow. "This isn't finished," she shouted, her voice carrying, thin but unmistakable. "You've set the realm on a knife's edge, Aegon Targaryen. You'll rule it over my corpse or yours." Rhaegal roared, the sound echoing off the red keep's wounded walls. Then he turned his head seaward, and in a few heartbeats he was gone, shrinking to a speck against the hazy blue, leaving only turbulence and the memory of beating wings. Silence swept the square. The bells, at last, stuttered to a halt. Jon stood in the sudden stillness, his hand still resting on Drogon's snout. The dragon's breath gusted around him, bewildered and anxious. Far above, Rhaegal dwindled into the distance, carrying away the woman Jon had loved and something more dangerous than any army. He became aware, slowly, of how many people were watching him. Grey Worm's knuckles were white on his spear. Behind him, Unsullied stood in tight ranks, their faces masks. The Dothraki shifted uneasily, horses sidestepping, nostrils flaring at the smell of dragon and fear. Northerners stared, their expressions a confused mix of awe and dread. Tyrion limped up to stand beside Jon. He smelled of sweat and smoke and old wine. His mismatched eyes flicked to the dragon, then to Jon. "In all my years," he said sotto voce, "I've never seen anything quite like that." Jon swallowed, his mouth suddenly dry. "I didn't mean for... I just wanted to stop her burning them." "Yes," Tyrion said, "you did." He paused, then added, "And in doing so, you may have set the field for a war like Westeros hasn't seen since dragons last devoured each other's flesh." Jon closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, Drogon was still there, still watching him. "What am I supposed to do?" Jon asked, almost to himself. There was no answer from the gods, or from Tyrion, or from the watching men. Drogon shifted his weight, cracking another patch of cobbles, and lowered his head until his jaw brushed Jon's shoulder. The answer, it seemed, had already been given. News traveled faster than ravens and slower than rumor. By the time the last Lannister banner was hauled down from the towers of the Red Keep and the first pale stag of House Baratheon was hung in its place, every corner of King's Landing knew some version of the story. Some said the queen had gone mad and tried to burn them all, only for her dragon to turn on her and force her to flee. Some claimed the dragon had gone mad, wild with the blood of war, and the queen had barely escaped its wrath. Others whispered that the dragon had recognized the true king, the northern bastard who was no bastard, and bent its head to him as if to a master. The words were all different, but the shape of them was the same. Drogon chose him. Jon heard the whispers as he walked the ruined halls of the Red Keep, as he waded through the ash that drifted in silent rooms. He heard them in the mutters of servants dragging corpses from collapsed houses, in the cautious voices of merchants who came licking their wounds, asking who would pay for warehouses burned in the chaos. No one whispered it to his face. They didn't need to. He could feel it in the way they looked at him, as if a flame had been lit behind their eyes. A possibility they had no right to consider, but could not quite extinguish. He hated it. In the shattered throne room, the melted remnants of the old king's chair loomed like the bones of a great beast Drogon had half devoured and then forgotten. Iron spikes bent and twisted in strange patterns, glinting under shafts of late sunlight filtering through a hole in the roof. Ash lay thick underfoot, whispering as Jon moved. Drogon was too big for the hall. He lay draped across what had once been the line of approach to the throne, wings half spread, tail coiled around a toppled pillar. His presence made the room feel smaller, the throne pitifully insignificant. Jon stood halfway between the doors and the dais. He did not want to go closer. "You can't leave him out in the courtyards forever," Tyrion said beside him, hands clasped behind his back. He'd be an easy target for any fool with a scorpion or another of Qyburn's delightful toys. There are enough of those scattered through the city to arm a small rebellion. Jon rubbed at his eyes with thumb and forefinger. "So we bring him in here, with that." He nodded toward what remained of the throne. "The chair is less important than the man who sits it," Tyrion said. "Or so I've heard." His gaze flicked sidelong at Jon. "Or the woman, or gods help us, a council. Though I suspect the realm would consider that a jest taken too far." "I'm not sitting on that thing," Jon said, more sharply than he intended. His voice echoed faintly in the wounded hall. Drogon's head lifted at the sound. "You may not have a choice," Tyrion said. "Not if Daenerys returns the way I think she will. Not if she brings Rhaegal with her." Jon looked at him. You think she won't give up? I think you know her well enough to answer that yourself, Tyrion said mildly. She crossed half the world to reclaim a home she'd never seen. For a father who was, by all accounts, mad. She walked into fire to hatch dragons she should not have had. She crucified the masters who would have kept her small, burned a city of slavers, and broke a khalasar with nothing but fire and a handful of words. Do you truly believe she will shrug and say, "Ah well, there's always Pentos, when her last dragon has chosen another"? Jon was silent. He did not believe it. She said, he began then stopped. Saying it aloud felt like making it more real. She said this wasn't finished. Tyrion's mouth twisted. Of course she did. Queens rarely consider anything finished until the last person who might oppose them has their head on a spike. Or their bones under rubble. That's not fair, isn't it? Tyrion arched a brow. You've seen what she is capable of when she feels cornered. Jon thought of Rhaegal's fire washing across the fleet in Blackwater Bay, of ships exploding into splinters and flaming men hurling themselves into the sea. He thought of the slavers at Meereen, of the Dothraki riding down fleeing men on the open plain, of the way she had watched with bright, intent eyes as fire devoured them. The world has not been kind to her, he said. That is true, Tyrion said quietly. Nor to you, nor to anyone who ends up in rooms like this. They both looked toward the throne. The question, Tyrion went on, is what you will become, now that the dragon has set the board. Jon laughed without humor. I don't want it. Yes, you've mentioned that once or twice, Tyrion said dryly. Unfortunately, wanting is rarely the measure the world uses. The North follows you. The men who fought beside you at Winterfell will follow you. The dragon follows you. Meanwhile, Daenerys has taken Rhaegal and a good portion of the Unsullied and Dothraki to Dragonstone, where she will lick her wounds and sharpen her teeth. When she returns, she will not come alone. She took half. Jon repeated. I thought. She has more ships than we managed to burn, Tyrion said, and loyal captains. Not all of the sellswords she hired died in the fighting. And do not forget the men of the Stormlands and the Marches who never loved the Lannisters but are also not overly fond of northern wolves. They see a dragon banner, they remember Aegon the Conqueror. They may be tempted to choose the dragon they already know. And the other half? Jon asked. Tyrion gestured toward the city beyond the ruined walls. They're out there, confused, frightened, waiting to see who gives them food and who hangs them. Which brings us back to that chair. Jon's skin crawled. He took a step closer to Drogon instead of the throne. The dragon's eye, the size of a man's shield, watched him. There was something almost accusing in it, or perhaps that was Jon's own guilt reflected back at him. This started because I yelled at him not to burn the city, he said, because I couldn't stand there and watch children burn. If I take that throne now, if I make myself king with a dragon's shadow behind me, what am I? What's the difference between me and every other bastard who's taken power because they had the better sword or the bigger army? Perhaps the difference lies in the fact that you're asking that question, Tyrion said. Most of those bastards never bothered. He laid a hand on Jon's arm. His fingers were short and scarred, but the grip was steady. Jon, listen to me. There is a storm coming. You can see the clouds as well as I can. 2 dragons, 2 claimants, 1 realm full of dry kindling. If you refuse to stand as her equal, you will stand as her victim. And she will burn this city from the ground up to remind them what happens when a dragon is denied. Jon looked past him, through the shattered arch of a window, to where smoke still rose from parts of the city. He imagined another dragon sweeping down, green fire washing across the tiles, ash rising in choking clouds. He imagined Drogon answering, the air above kings landing turning to a furnace as brother fought brother. It will be like the tales old Nan whispered, he thought numbly. The dance of the dragons, when they tore each other to pieces in the sky and castles burned and the realm cracked under the strain. The last time dragons fought dragons, Tyrion said, as if plucking the thought from his head. It nearly destroyed House Targaryen, It very nearly destroyed the realm. History has a way of repeating itself in this world, especially when no one bothers to read the book. His lips twisted. I've read it. It's not an ending I'd care to see staged again. Jon's hand curled unconsciously into Drogon's scales. The dragon hummed, as if sensing his turmoil. What would you have me do? Jon asked. Name myself king? Raise banners against her? Send ravens to every corner of the realm saying, follow me or burn? I would have you gather those who are already inclined to follow you, yes, Tyrion said. I would have you secure the loyalty of the North, the Vale, the Riverlands, perhaps even Dorne and the Reach if we can convince them that a man who rode a dragon against the dead is a better bet than a woman who nearly burned their capital despite its surrender. I would have you appoint a council, one with more sense than pride, to help you make decisions. And when Daenerys comes back, I would have you strong enough that she cannot sweep you aside like dust. Jon stared at him. You're asking me to prepare for war against her. I'm asking you to prepare for the war she has already begun, Tyrion said. With that command in the square, with that threat as she flew away. You heard her. You felt it, I think, more keenly than any of us. Jon had felt it, not just in her words, but in her eyes, the wounded, searing certainty that anyone who stood in her way deserved whatever came. He choked on the memory. She won't stop, he said. No, Tyrion said softly. She won't. Jon closed his eyes. For a heartbeat, he let himself imagine another way. Dropping his sword, walking out of this broken castle, taking ship for the far side of the world where no one knew his name. Let the dragons burn each other and the throne and the city. Let the wolves and lions and stags and roses tear each other apart. Let him be no one again. Then he thought of Arya's face, streaked with dust and blood beneath the falling stones. Of Sansa's stiff, proud shoulders as she stood in the gods' wood and asked him a simple, terrible question. What if there's someone better? He thought of the children already dead in the streets below, of the ones who would die if he walked away. He opened his eyes. Call the lords, he said hoarsely. Whoever is left alive and willing to come. We'll see what they say. Tyrion exhaled, some tension leaving his shoulders. I'll send the ravens. Davos will help. He's better with ships than I am with birds. And you, Jon added, looking at him, will stand with me when they ask whose madness brought us here. Madness, Tyrion said, is in the eye of the historian. He patted Jon's arm and turned away. Let's try to give them something interesting to argue about. He limped toward the doors, boots stirring ash. Jon remained, the dragon at his side, the melted throne before him, the weight of the choice he had already made settling on his shoulders like fresh snow. At Dragonstone, the sea crashed endlessly against the black rocks, indifferent to dragons or queens. Daenerys stood on the edge of the causeway, the wind whipping her hair around her face, and stared out into the gray water as if it had wronged her. Behind her, the fortress sprawled like a stone dragon frozen mid-flight, its carved steps and towers slick with salt spray. Smoke curled from one of the highest terraces where Regal lay basking, the sound of his occasional grumbling cry echoing off the cliffs. Grey Worm waited a respectful distance away. His armor was newly polished, though there were dents he'd never bothered to hammer out. He held his helmet under his arm, his shaved head beaded with mist. His eyes were fixed on her back. At length she spoke, the words nearly lost to the wind. He chose him. Grey Worm did not pretend confusion. The Black One resisted your command, he said carefully. He was confused. He was not confused, Daenerys snapped. He heard me. He heard me tell him to burn that traitor, and he refused. He lowered his head to him, Grey Worm, like a dog. She spit the last word as if it tasted foul. He is a dragon, Grey Worm said. He has no words, but he has been with you longest. He will remember. Will he? She hugged her arms around herself, though the wind wasn't cold enough to merit it. Or will he remember the man who put his hand on his head and told him to stand down while cowards rang bells and Lannisters knelt? Will he remember blood and fire? or the one who took both from him? Grey Worm's jaw flexed. We still have Regal, he said. He obeys. He will burn those you command him to burn. Yes, she murmured, looking up toward where the green dragon's silhouette cut against the cloudy sky. He will. She had seen it already. When they'd landed on the windswept island, both dragon and rider trembling from the strain of their flight, she had commanded him to drive off a cluster of gulls wheeling too close to the battlements. It had been a petty use of his power, but she'd needed to see. Regal had obeyed instantly, scouring the air with a short blast of flame and sending the birds screeching away. It had soothed something raw inside her. He is not Drogon, she said, but he is mine, and I will not lose him. Grey Worm said nothing. There was nothing to say. Loyalty was a simple thing to him. You gave it or you didn't. He had given his to her long ago, in a city of pyramids and chains, and he had never taken it back. The men, Daenerys asked abruptly, turning to face him. How many came with us? Half of the Unsullied, he said. Most of the Dothraki. His mouth tightened almost imperceptibly. Some ran when the Black One refused to burn the city. They were afraid. Afraid, she repeated. Afraid of a dragon refusing fire. They should be more afraid of me. They will be, Grey Worm said simply. She looked past him to the courtyard where some of the riders were sparring, their curved blades flashing, their laughs harsh on the salt air. Most had not set foot on Dragonstone before. They were restless, pacing like caged cats. Beyond them, in the lower yard, soldiers unloaded barrels of grain and casks of wine from the ships that had survived the battle in Blackwater Bay. Her host was smaller than it had been, but still formidable. Too small, though, to sweep Westeros if it unified behind anyone else. They whisper of him, she said. Even here, they whisper his name. They say the dragon chose him. They say we fought the dead together and he came back with a crown of ice on his head, hidden in his hair. They say he is a hero. Grey Worm's lip curled faintly. He is a man. Men die. So simple, she murmured. For you, it is simple. For me, every choice twists into another, and every one seems to lead to betrayal. She closed her eyes briefly. She saw her brother's sneer, felt the phantom weight of molten gold on his head. She saw the faces of the men she had crucified, the boys she had locked in cells as hostages. She saw Yora's dying eyes, Ygritte's shock, Missandei's calm resolve as the mountain shook under her feet. She saw Jon's hand on Drogon's head. I should have killed him at Winterfell, she said through her teeth. When I learned what he is, I should have turned one of them on him right there, when the snows were still red with the dead. But I loved him. I believed, God's help me, I believed we could share this, that there was enough destiny for both of us. Grey Worm looked at her as if she had spoken in another language. Love meant little to him, except as the memory of one woman's hand on his and her voice promising him that the world could be gentler than he had known. That woman was dead now, her head taken by a monster in armor. Love to Grey Worm was a wound that refused to heal. You are the queen, he said. Only one. Yes, she whispered. Only one. She pulled her gaze from the sea and walked back up the causeway, Grey Worm falling into step behind her. As they passed under one of the carved stone dragons that arched over the path, she laid her hand briefly on its flank. The stone was slick with spray, cold and unyielding. Nothing like living scale. In the great hall, a map of Westeros stretched across the floor, worn by generations of boots and the drip of roof leaks. Daenerys stood at its center, her skirts whispering over painted rivers and cities. Show me, she said to Grey Worm. Where are they likely to bend the knee to him? Grey Worm hesitated. Maps were not his domain. The North, he said at last. Their banners followed him against the dead. They follow him now. Daenerys's lips thinned. The North was never mine, she said. They were always only his. What else? The Vale, Grey Worm said. Their young lord listened when he spoke. And the Riverlands. The Tully man fought for him. She knelt and touched those places on the map. Winterfell, the Eyrie, Riverrun. This half, she said, and my half. Her hand swept over Dragonstone, over the Stormlands and King's Landing and the Reach, the storm-dappled stretch of countryside that had once fed the capital. A line between us, she murmured. Dragons on either side. Her fingers curled into a fist. History repeats, she said. Aegon and his sisters, but with the sisters at war. The maesters will write songs of it. They will give it some pretty name. The Second Dance, perhaps, or the War of Flame and Snow. They will weigh our sins and choose their favorite. But we will be the ones to bleed. Grey Worm watched her, expressionless. If he feared what such a war would mean for his soldiers, he did not show it. He had lived his entire life in the shadow of war. Another would not change him. How do we win? He asked. She smiled, slow and terrible. We find a way to make the dragon obey me again, she said. All of them, or enough that one refuses no more. Her eyes went to the far corner of the hall, where a strange object stood on a stone pedestal. A length of black metal, twisted and ridged, carved with sigils that hurt the eye. It had been brought from Euron Greyjoy's flagship after Blackwater Bay, pried from the drowned man's corpse-clutching hands by sailors who knew enough to fear it but not enough to understand. A horn, Euron had called it, with a grin like a knife. A horn to wake dragons. A horn to bind them. Some had whispered in Old Volantis, where dragon lords once walked. Daenerys crossed to it. Her fingers hovered over the metal without quite touching. It seemed to hum faintly in the air, as if it were some sleeping thing that dreamed of fire. If I can bind one, she said softly, perhaps I can bind both. Grey Worm shifted. Is it wise to use a thing we do not understand? Wise, she said. Was it wise to wake dragons from stone? To walk into fire? To cross the narrow sea on the word of a spider and a beggar knight? No, but I did it, and I'm here, and my enemies are ash. She closed her hand around the horn. It was hot, as if it had been lying in the sun. The heat sank into her palm, thrummed up her arm like a second heartbeat. For an instant, she felt something vast and cold and hungry turn its attention toward her, from very far away and very deep below. She sucked in a breath and let go. Heat lingered in her skin. This realm will be mine, she said, more to the horn than to Grey Worm, or it will be no one's. In the weeks that followed, ravens grew weary, and so did men. From King's Landing, messengers rode out on half-starved horses, bearing letters with Jon's cramped, plain handwriting and Tyrion's more elegant flourishes. They went north to Winterfell, east to the Eyrie, south to Highgarden's ghosts and Dorne's secretive princes. They carried words of peace where they could, warnings of war where peace would not hold. Some lords answered with eagerness, racing to stamp their own seal on the shifting future. Others answered cautiously, wary of dragons and rumors both. A few did not answer at all. Sansa Stark's reply was the first Jon read. Her letter was brief and cool, the curves of her script as controlled as the words. The North remembers, she wrote. It remembers what fire did when it came in the name of kings. It remembers what it owes to the man who led it against the dead. The North will not bend the knee to any foreign queen. It will follow the one it named king, because he kept his word to them, even when it killed him. She did not write brother. She did not write bastard. She signed her name with both wolf and tullyfish beneath it. Jon read it in the melted throne room, the dragon at his back, and felt something in him twist. Pride, perhaps, or fear. They look to you, Tyrion said, reading over his shoulder. She speaks for more than the North when she writes it. There are others who will take courage from her words. Or be angered by them, Jon said. Anger is inevitable, Tyrion said. Better it be directed at you than at the idea of justice. At least you are capable of listening. Arya came with the northern host, riding ahead of the banners on a small, wiry horse that took the southern heat badly. She arrived dusty and sharp-eyed, with a sword on her hip and a knife up each sleeve, and did not bother with courtesies. You didn't write, she said. as if he had committed some minor household offense. "So I thought I'd come see if you were dead." "I'm not," Jon said. "I can see that," she said. Her gaze flicked past him to the great black bulk of Drogon sprawled in the courtyard. "You kept busy." He laughed, a short huff. "Wasn't my doing." "That's what they say," she answered. She dismounted in one fluid movement, tossed her reins to a squire, and came to stand beside him. "They also say you're king now." "I'm not. Yet," she said. He looked at her. She was thinner than he remembered, though harder to see it under the leather and mail she wore. Her hair was shorter. The lines around her eyes were deeper. There was something distant in her gaze, as if part of her still lived in some corridor of shadows only she could see. "You came anyway," he said. "I told Sansa," she said, "that whatever you'd done, if you were in danger from the Dragon Queen, I was going south again. Someone has to make sure you don't get yourself killed." Again, he huffed. "I thought you had a list." "I did," she said. "It's shorter now." She paused. "I can make a new one." "There'll be no need," he said quickly. "No lists, no assassinations. We're trying to avoid another war." "You're failing," she said cheerfully. "She left with the other dragon, didn't she?" "The green one." He nodded. "And she told you she'd be back," Arya said. "She doesn't seem like the forgiving type." "She isn't," he said. "But if we can show the realm that there's another way, if enough lords stand with me." "You'll what?" Arya asked. "Talk her out of burning you? Talk the dragon into dropping her into the sea? You're good, Jon, but you're not that good." He had no answer for that. She smiled as if she had expected none. "I'll help," she said. "I'll go wherever you need me. I'll cut whoever needs cutting. But don't pretend this isn't a war. Whether you fight it with swords or words or dragons, it's still a war." He thought of Daenerys on Rhaegal's back, the wind tearing at her hair, her eyes blazing as she promised him an ending. He thought of the horn she had taken from Euron, though he did not know what it was, only that he felt a chill whenever he remembered it clutched in her hand. "Then we'll fight it," he said. "But we'll try to end it with as few burned as we can." "Few," Arya repeated, as if tasting the word. "Few is better than many, I suppose." Her eyes slid again to Drogon. The dragon watched her back, his nostrils flaring. She smiled, slow and feral. "Le. See if your new friend likes Starks as much as he likes Targaryens." The first clash came in the skies over the King's Road. It happened so suddenly that there was barely time to think, let alone plan. Jon had ridden north with a small party. Tyrion, Davos, a handful of guards, and Drogon's shadow overhead, to meet with lords of the Riverlands who had hesitated to come all the way to the capital. It was supposed to be a gesture of good faith, proof that he was not hiding behind castle walls and dragonfire. The day was clear, the road dusty, the air heavy with the smell of damp fields and late summer rot. He heard Rhaegal before he saw him. A distant roar rolled across the sky, so deep it seemed to vibrate in Jon's teeth. Horses screamed and shied. Men shouted, craning their necks. Jon's heart lurched. He had heard that roar in battle, and in the quiet of dawn, had flown to its echo. There was a note in it now he did not recognize, a strained, unnatural edge that made the hairs on his arms stand up. He looked up. Drogon was a dark shape high above, circling lazily, more out of boredom than vigilance. At the sound of his brother's cry, he stiffened. His wings flared. In an instant, his posture changed from relaxed to predatory. Jon barely had time to shout his name before the green shape came knifing out of the sun. Rhaegal plunged like an arrow loosed from a god's bow, wings tucked tight against his sides. The sunlight turned his scales to shards of emerald and bronze. His roar rose in pitch as he dove, the sound shivering through Jon's bones. On his back, Daenerys was a streak of pale silver and red leather, hair streaming, eyes fixed on her target. "Scatter!" Davos bellowed, spurring his horse off the road. Off the King's Road, into the ditch. Men obeyed more from instinct than command, spurring their mounts toward whatever cover they could find. Jon did not move. His horse danced beneath him, rolling its eyes, but he held the reins firm. "Drogon!" he shouted. The black dragon answered with a roar of his own, deeper and fuller. He folded one wing, dropping in a controlled slide, then snapped both wide again, rushing upward to meet Rhaegal's descent. They met with a crack that split the air. For a moment, it was like watching two storms collide. Claws scraped against scales with a sound like grinding stone. Wings buffeted wings. Fire burst in a sudden, blinding blast where their heads met, erupting sideways into the empty sky. Jon's horse reared, nearly unseating him. He clung on by reflex, his eyes never leaving the tangle above. "Mother's mercy," Davos whispered somewhere to his left. "They'll tear each other apart." Rhaegal latched onto Drogon's neck with a bite meant for killing. Drogon twisted, throwing his bulk sideways, teeth snapping at his brother's wing. Green and black intertwined, twisting and writhing, plummeting for a terrifying moment toward the ground before Drogon managed to wrench free enough to beat his wings. They surged upward again, circling, darting in and out like monstrous fighting cocks. On Rhaegal's back, Daenerys clung like a burr, her legs locked tight around his narrower shoulders. Her face was set in a rictus of concentration and rage. She shouted something Jon couldn't hear, words torn away by the wind. "Drogon!" Jon shouted again, forcing his voice into the churning air. "To me!" It was futile, he knew. He was a speck on the ground. The dragons were in their own element, far above such tiny concerns. And yet Drogon's head jerked at the sound. For a heartbeat, his eyes flicked downward. That tiny distraction was enough for Rhaegal to rake his side with enormous claws. Drogon bellowed, a sound of pain and fury both. Black blood spattered the sky, falling in slow, viscous droplets that hissed when they hit the dirt. "Come down!" Jon roared, his heart hammering. "Drogon, down!" Rhaegal lunged again, jaws snapping. Drogon beat his wings hard, flipping over in the air in a maneuver that nearly defied physics. He bit back, teeth sinking into the membrane of Rhaegal's wing. The green dragon shrieked, the sound knifing through the air. They wheeled in a tight spiral, both struggling for advantage. Daenerys' cloak whipped behind her like a banner, her hair tangled around her face. She lifted one hand from the spine she held and brought something to her lips. At first Jon thought it was only some whistle, some small thing carried more as a talisman than a tool. Then the sound came. It was unlike any horn he had ever heard, low and deep and layered, a note that seemed to vibrate in his bones and the ground and the air at once. It was not loud, exactly, but it was inescapable. It ground under his skin like a bruise pressed too hard. His horse screamed and bolted. Jon barely stayed in the saddle, hauling at the reins until the beast stumbled to a halt, sides heaving. Drogon and Rhaegal froze. The note of the horn went on, modulating subtly, like the groan of a vast door opening somewhere far below the world. Both dragons shuddered. Rhaegal's eyes rolled white for an instant, showing more of their inner paler ring than they should. Drogon convulsed, his wings faltering. They dropped several dozen feet in a sickening plunge before their bodies remembered how to fly. "7 hells?" Tyrion gasped from where he crouched in a ditch, hands over his ears. "What in the name of all the gods is that?" Jon had no words. He could only stare as the dragons writhed. Rhaegal steadied first. His pupils blew wide, swallowing nearly all the green. His movements smoothed out, became almost mechanical in their precision. He disengaged from Drogon with a deliberate grace that had nothing of instinct in it. He turned his head toward Drogon, who was still thrashing, fighting some unseen constraint. The horn's note shifted slight, ly deepening, vibrating more harshly in the air. Drogon's wings snapped suddenly still. His body locked rigid. For a terrifying moment he hung there, suspended in the sky as if held up by invisible strings. Daenerys took the horn from her lips. The note cut off, leaving a ringing absence that seemed even louder. Drogon dropped like a stone. Gasps and shouts erupted from the men below as the black dragon plummeted. His wings flared at the last possible instant, catching enough air to turn a killing impact into a bone-jarring crash. He hit the ground in a plume of dust not 50 yards from Jon, skidding furrows into the earth. Jon's horse went mad, rearing and screaming. Jon threw himself from the saddle, hitting the dirt shoulder first and rolling. He came up bruised and breathless, eyes fixed on Drogon. The dragon lay on his side, sides heaving. His eyes rolled, their pupils flickering between narrow slits and blown circles. His limbs twitched as if caught in some invisible net. "Drogon," Jon said hoarsely, stumbling toward him. "Drogon." Regal spiraled down with far more control, landing a safe distance away in a spray of dirt. His tail lashed once, twice, then stilled. He lowered his head to his rider in a gesture that was almost deferential. Daenerys slid from his back with the ease of long practice this time, landing in a crouch. She straightened, hair wild around her face, cheeks flushed. The horn hung from a strap around her neck, its black metal dull and somehow greasy to the eye. Jon felt sweat break out on his forehead that had nothing to do with heat. She walked toward Drogon. Grey Worm followed, half a step behind, spear at the ready. Behind them, a knot of Unsullied fell into formation, shields up. They moved through the chaos of scattered horses and shaken men like a knife through butter. Jon reached Drogon's head and dropped to his knees. The dragon's breath came in ragged blasts, each one carrying a whiff of smoke and panic. His eyes flicked to Jon and away, unfocused. His limbs strained against nothing, claws digging trenches in the dirt. "What have you done to him?" Jon shouted as Daenerys approached. "Leveled the field," she said. "You aren't the only one with old magic in your veins, it seems." She lifted the horn slightly, letting it catch the light. "It hurts him," Jon said. He could feel it, in some wordless corner of his mind where dragon and man bled into each other. Drogon was in pain. Not the clean, sharp pain of wounds, but a sick twisting, as if something were clawing inside his skull. "All power hurts," Daenerys said. "Ask anyone who's sat a throne for long, or who's tried to break chains." She stopped a few yards away, studying Drogon as a farmer might study a rebellious bull. There was anger in her gaze, yes, but also a clinical curiosity that chilled Jon. "He refused me again," she said. "Even after all we've shared. He chose you. I might have forgiven you for stealing hearts and whispers, Jon. I cannot forgive you for stealing my child." "I didn't," he began. She cut him off with a raised hand. "Spare me," she said. "We both know you gave him no command he did not wish to follow. But dragons do not make oaths. Men do, and you broke yours." Grey Worm's spear dipped slightly, pointing toward Jon's chest. "Don't," Jon said warningly. "Or what?" Daenerys asked. "You'll have your dragon burn me? Command him to tear out my throat? It seems you can't now." Jon reached for Drogon, laying his hand against the dragon's warm snout. The contact steadied him as much as it did the beast. He pushed his voice down the strange tether between them. "Easy," he thought. "Easy, boy. Breathe." Drogon's frantic panting slowed a fraction. "You're hurting him," Jon said. "If that horn can do this to him, what do you think it's doing to Regal? To you?" Her jaw tightened. "Regal obeys," she said. "Regal is loyal." "Because you force him," Jon said. "Because you make him with that thing. That's not loyalty, Daenerys. That's slavery." The word hit the air like a thrown stone. Her eyes flashed. Color rose in her cheeks. "Slavery?" she repeated incredulously. "You dare to speak to me of slavery after what I did in Astapor, in Yunkai, in Meereen? After I freed thousands who'd never even seen a coin of their own?" "Exactly," Jon said. "You freed them. You fought to end chains. And now you stand there using another kind of chain on the creatures you call your children. They are weapons," she snapped. "They are fire-given flesh. They exist to serve their rider's will. Without it, they are nothing but beasts. Even beasts deserve better than pain," Jon said. "They deserve purpose," she shot back. "As do men. You had one. You were to stand beside me, not in front of me. You threw that away. I tried, he said. I tried to support you. I killed for you. I watched friends die for you. I bent the knee. You made them love you, she said. That was your crime. You made them love you more than they feared me. She took another step closer. The horn at her chest seemed to pulse faintly, as if with a heartbeat. This ends now, she said. Kneel. Swear in front of your men that you will never again stand against me. Swear that you will be my hand and my sword, that the North will bend the knee and you will bring it to heel. Swear that you will give me what is mine, and I will let you live. I will even let you ride him again, perhaps, if I am feeling generous. And if I don't? Jon asked. She smiled with no humor at all. Then I blow this horn until both dragons tear themselves apart, she said. Until there is nothing left in the sky but cinders. I will not allow a world where they call you king and me usurper. Better a world with no dragons than one in which they do not answer me. Her fingers brushed the horn. Jon stared at her. For a heartbeat, he saw not the woman he had held in the flickering glow of a cabin's fire, not the queen who had walked into flames and come out with dragons on her shoulders, but a stranger shaped by every betrayal and every loss. You'd kill them, he said softly. Your own children, just to keep them from choosing anyone else. I will do whatever I must, she said. That is what queens do when men set the board against them. Drogon shuddered under Jon's hand. The ache in Jon's skull deepened, as if the remnants of the horn's song were echoing inside him. He thought of Tyrion's words, of the old tales of dragon wars. He thought of castles burning, of fields turned to glass, of people crushed under falling stone. He thought of the North, of Arya watching from some shadow, of Sansa in Winterfell with her wolves. He thought of Daenerys herself, how once he had believed he could love her and serve her both, that their shared purpose was enough to bridge the chasm between fire and snow. You're leaving me no choice, he said. There are always choices, she said. You are simply too honorable to stomach most of them. She lifted the horn. Jon moved before he thought. He did not go for his sword. He went for her. He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, dirt sliding under his boots. Grey Worm's spear flashed, darting for his chest, but Jon knocked it aside with his forearm, feeling the metal graze leather and skin. Pain made the world narrow to a sharp, bright point. Daenerys had brought the horn halfway to her lips when he grabbed her wrist. Her skin was hot under his fingers, pulses fluttering like trapped birds. The horn jerked in her grasp. Regal roared, reacting to his rider's distress. His wings flared, stirring a gale that threw men and horses off their feet. Grey Worm recovered his balance with terrifying speed. He swung the butt of his spear, aiming for Jon's temple. Something black and enormous moved. Drogon launched himself like a cat, his movements clumsy but driven by raw protectiveness. His tail lashed out, as thick as a tree trunk, catching Grey Worm and flinging him aside like a doll. The unsullied commander hit the ground hard, his spear spinning away. The horn slipped from Daenerys' fingers. It fell in slow motion, spinning end over end, catching light along its twisted length. Jon let go of her wrist and snatched at it. His fingers closed around the metal. Fire ran up his arm. He cried out, the sound torn from his chest. The horn was white-hot, searing his skin. The note of its earlier cry echoed in his bones. But this was different, less controlled, less directed. It was like grabbing a live coal torn from a dragon's belly. Somewhere far away, he heard Daenerys scream, "No!" Whether in anger or fear, he could not tell. He slammed the horn down, hacking it against a rock. Cracks spiderwebbed through the metal, glowing like veins of lava. The sound that poured out of it was no longer a horn's note, but a chaotic, discordant shriek, 100 tones atop each other, shredding the air. Drogon screamed. Regal screamed. The dragons convulsed. Their wings snapped tight, then flared wide. Their claws dug furrows deep enough to bury men. Their eyes rolled holy white. Jon hit the ground, still clutching the horn. The heat was unbearable. He smelled charred flesh and realized, distantly, that it was his own hand cooking around the metal. He smashed it again and again. On the third blow, the horn shattered. It did not simply break. It exploded. Shards of black metal flew outward like shrapnel, slicing through leather and flesh. Jon threw up his arm to shield his face. Something tore across his forearm, hot and wet. The sound cut off. Silence fell like a dropped curtain. For a moment, no one moved. Even the dragons froze, their great bodies rigid. Then Drogon collapsed. The black dragon hit the ground with a force that set the earth trembling. His head rolled sideways, jaws slack. Smoke leaked from his nostrils in thin, pathetic threads. His eyes were closed, lids twitching as if he dreamed. Rhaegal staggered. He took 2 steps backward, his tail thrashing. His wings drooped. He shook his head violently, as if trying to dislodge some invisible insect burrowing in his brain. Daenerys swayed. Her knees buckled. Jon, still blinking ash and sweat from his eyes, half saw her fall and half felt it, like a drop in air pressure. He pushed himself up, his burned hands screaming, and saw her on her knees in the dirt. Blood trickled from her nose. Her eyes were unfocused for a heartbeat, then snapped back into awful clarity. "You fool," she whispered. "You damned fool. Do you know what you've done?" "Stopped you from using it again," Jon panted. His lungs felt raw, scraped. "Stopped you from hurting them, from forcing them. You may have killed them," she spat. She staggered to her feet, pointing a shaking finger at Drogon's motionless flank. "Look at him. Look at what your honor has cost." He did look. Drogon lay still, too still. "Drogon," Jon whispered. No answer. He stumbled to the dragon's side. His burned hand shook as he laid it on the hot scales. There was heat, yes, and a faint rise and fall, but nothing like the vibrant, restless energy that usually thrummed under his palm. It was like touching a banked fire, one wrong breath away from going out. "Breathe," Jon murmured. "Come on, breathe. You stubborn great lizard. Don't you dare." A shudder ran through Drogon. His chest heaved. His eyes cracked open, just a sliver. A low moan leaked from his throat, a sound of raw hurt. Jon sagged in relief. "He's alive," he said. "For now," Daenerys said, her voice raw. "You shattered the horn. You severed a bond, yo. You didn't understand. Do you think there will be no cost?" He looked at Rhaegal. The green dragon shook himself once more, then fixed Jon with a stare that was wrong. There was clarity in it, yes, but also something like accusation. His pupils were uneven, one more dilated than the other. He exhaled a blast of hot air, half snort, half snarl. "Rhaegal," Daenerys said, voice trembling. "Rhaegal to me." The dragon hesitated. For a heartbeat, he did not move. For a heartbeat, he looked between queen and man, as Drogon once had. Jon saw recognition flicker there, the memory of another rider, another bond. Then, slowly, Rhaegal lowered his head to Daenerys. He pressed his snout against her outstretched hand. She let out a breath that was half sob. "He's still mine," she whispered. "He's still mine." Jon met the dragon's gaze over her shoulder. There was no love in Rhaegal's eyes now, if there had ever been. There was pain and a kind of wary resignation. He would fly for her. He would burn for her. But something in him had been twisted by the horn, and in breaking it, Jon had left scars. Maybe on all of them. "You took my weapon," Daenerys said, straightening slowly. "You saved your dragon. For now. Congratulations, Jon Snow. You've ensured that the war ahead will be written in blood and fire the old-fashioned way, without shortcuts." He pushed himself to his feet, every muscle aching. "It was never going to be anything else," he said. She looked at him, truly looked, as she had not since the square in King's Landing. For a heartbeat, he saw something soft in her gaze, some shadow of the woman who had asked him, in a frozen hall in the north, if he believed in her. "If you had stood beside me," she said, "none of this would be necessary. If you had spared them," he said, None of this would be either. They stood in the ruined field, dragons broken and panting behind them, men watching with wide, frightened eyes from the ditches and hedgerows. The King's Road stretched past them, a line of mud and stones, leading to a city that sang of ashes and a castle where a melted throne waited for an unwilling king. "We're past if," Daenerys said quietly. "All that's left is when." She whistled, a sharp, piercing sound. Regal responded sluggishly, wings dragging as he spread them. He gathered himself and leapt, his takeoff clumsier than it had been. He rose, circling once low, then higher. Daenerys did not mount him this time. She watched him with tight fists and burning eyes. "We will meet again," she said. "Soon, in the sky above your city with all the world watching." She turned and walked away, Grey Worm limping at her side, his left arm hanging at an odd angle from where Drogon's tail had caught him. Unsullied fell in around them, shields up, spears bristling. No one moved to stop her. Jon sank down beside Drogon, the dragon's laboring breath washing over him. He had shattered the horn. He had saved Drogon from bondage. He had also shattered the last, frail chance that this might end without a dragon war. When the war came in full, it came as fire in the night. They called it later the Night of Two Fires. King's Landing had rebuilt some of its wits in the months since the bells. Half its homes were still ruined. Many of its people had fled. But markets had reopened in the less damaged districts. New stalls sprouted like weeds along the safer streets. In the taverns, men drank to the Dragon King and cursed the Dragon Queen in the same breath, depending on who they thought might be listening. Jon slept little. He kept his chambers in a wing of the Red Keep that had taken less damage, though cracks still marred the plaster and the wind whispered through gaps in the stone. Drogon took to curling on the outer bastions at night, his bulk draped over parapets, his presence both comfort and constant reminder. On the night it began, Jon stood at a high window, looking out over the city. Lanterns flickered in the streets below, small, defiant stars in a darkness that had known too much fire. Farther out, in the countryside, pinpricks of light marked the tents of armies that had come to stand with him. A patchwork of banners. Wolf, trout, falcon, sun and spear, rose, and more. He should have been exhausted. He was, but his mind would not still. "You should sleep," Tyrion said from the doorway. He held a cup of wine, though it looked as if he had been nursing it for some time. "The men will expect their king to look fresh and inspiring tomorrow." "I'm not." Yes, I know," Tyrion said. "I'm not a king. You should put it on your banners. It might help." He came to stand beside Jon, peering out into the night. "Nevertheless, they call you one. You might as well enjoy the trappings." "I don't enjoy any of this," Jon said. "Good," Tyrion said. "The day you do is the day I start packing for somewhere very far away." They stood in silence for a bit. The sea was a dark smear on the horizon. Somewhere out there, Daenerys assembled her own forces, her own alliances. The line between them was a narrow strip of water and a great deal of uncertainty. "How long do you think we have?" Jon asked. "Before she strikes?" Tyrion shrugged. With her dragons weakened, she needed time. Time to let them heal. Time to find more men willing to follow a queen whose last entrance to this city nearly ended in fire. Time to listen to the whispers and decide which of them to heed. Time to be angry. He sipped his wine. Anger can be very patient. "You didn't answer," Jon said. "To your side." "No, I didn't, because I don't know. I can make guesses. But if there is one thing the last few years have taught me, it is that dragons, dead men, and stubborn Starks have little respect for schedules." A shout cut through the night, came from the battlements high and sharp. Jon stiffened. Tyrion lowered his cup slowly. Another shout, then another. Not the alarmed cries of men surprised by a drunken fight or a fire in some poor quarter. There was urgency in them that raised the hairs on Jon's arms. He didn't wait. He was halfway to the door when a wind slammed against the tower. It rattled the window shutters and made the stones underfoot shiver. A moment later, a roar rolled over the castle, so loud it seemed to tear the sky. Drogon's answering bellow shook the air. "7 bloody hells," Tyrion breathed. "They're here." Jon didn't reply. He ran. The corridors of the Red Keep twisted and turned, some half-blocked with rubble, others repaired in haste with mismatched stones. He took the fastest route he knew, feet pounding, breath burning in his lungs. Men shouted around him, doors flew open, armor clinked as guards scrambled. By the time he burst out onto the upper battlements, the night had become a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. Drogon was airborne, a vast black shape silhouetted against the stars. Flames licked around his jaws. His wings beat a furious rhythm, scattering loose tiles and debris in gusts. Opposite him, Rhaegal rode the air like a living wound. The green dragon's movements were jerky, not as smooth as they'd once been. His wings beat slightly out of sync, giving his flight a lopsided cadence. But he flew, and his fire was no less deadly for his scars. Daenerys was on his back. Jon saw her as a pale streak, her hair tied back now in braids that whipped behind her. She wore armor of scaled leather and mail, lighter than full plate, more suited to a rider who might need to throw herself flat against a dragon's neck in mid-flight. Her face, as she turned it toward the city, was unreadable at this distance. Rhaegal exhaled. Green fire washed over a lower tower, turning stone orange and then white with heat. Men screamed. The tower did not collapse. Not yet, but it blackened, its crenellations melting like wax. "Get the scorpions," someone shouted. "We can't hit her with him up there," another yelled, gesturing at Drogon. "Don't you dare," Jon snapped. "If anyone so much as points one of Qyburn's toys at the dragons, I'll feed them to Drogon myself." The soldiers nearest him looked startled, then nodded, backing away from the mounted scorpions that had been rebuilt in case of exactly this. "This is between them," Tyrion said quietly at his side. "Is that the plan? Let the dragons fight it out while we watch and hope they don't decide to remember there's an entire city beneath them." "It's between her and me," Jon said. "And between them, yes, but I'm not watching from here." He ran to the edge of the battlement, ignoring the startled cries of men who thought he meant to throw himself off. Drogon swooped lower at his call, his massive body curving around the tower. "Drogon!" Jon shouted. "Here!" The dragon dipped, his claws scraping stone, and hovered just long enough for Jon to leap onto his back. He had never done it like this before, without the gradual adjustment of saddle and harness. His boots slipped on slick scales. For a terrifying instant, he dangled over emptiness, fingers clawing for purchase. Then Drogon shifted, angling his body to give Jon a better grip. Jon's hands found a ridge of spine. He scrambled up, chest heaving. "Up!" he shouted, though there was little need. Drogon launched himself like a thrown spear. The world dropped away. Wind tore at Jon's hair, his clothes, his burned hand. The city beneath them shrank, lanterns smearing into lines of light. Towers became children's toys. The roar of the crowd faded under the rush of air. Ahead, Rhaegal turned, drawn by Drogon's rise. Brother met brother again, this time over the heart of the city. Their first clash had been over fields and road. This one was over stone and flesh and history. They circled each other in the dark, black and green, fire licking like tongues under their jaws. Their roars rattled window glass and shook birds from their nests. On Rhaegal's back, Daenerys leaned forward, her eyes locked on Jon. He could see her clearly now, the set of her mouth, the glitter in her gaze. He thought, suddenly and stupidly, of the first time he had seen her, stepping off a ship at Dragonstone, the sea wind whipping her hair, her hand reaching to touch the sand of her birthright. There had been awe in that moment and hope. There was no hope here. She raised her hand. Rhaegal lunged. "Up!" Jon shouted desperately. Drogon shot straight up, wings beating frantically. Rhaegal's flame licked the air where they had been a heartbeat before, a wash of green and gold that seared Jon's boots. Heat slammed into him, hot enough to blister. He flattened himself against Drogon's neck, teeth gritted. "Down!" he yelled as soon as the worst had passed. Drogon folded his wings, dropping in a controlled fall. They arrowed past Rhaegal's flank, so close Jon could have reached out and brushed green scales. He did not dare. He did shout, though. "Daenerys!" He bellowed, his voice torn to shreds by the wind. "Look at me!" She did. Their eyes met across a gap of air and distance that might as well have been inches or miles. For a heartbeat, the war fell away. It was just them, as it had been in a cold northern hall, in a dragonlit sky over frozen lakes. "Stop!" he shouted. "We can still. We are past talking," she shouted back. The wind whipped her words, but he caught them. "You made that choice when you broke the horn, when you crowned yourself with their love. I never." "Enough!" she screamed. Rhaegal spun, tail whipping, caught Drogon across the muzzle. Drogon roared, rearing back. His jaws snapped, catching only air. Rhaegal Dar. Ted in again, claws scraping along Drogon's flank. Sparks flew where Talon met scale. Jon clung, his burned hand throbbing in time with his heart. He could not bring himself to command Drogon to kill Rhaegal, to kill her, though he knew in some cold, rational corner that it might be the only way to stop this. He tried something else. "Drogon!" he shouted near the dragon's ear. "Up! Take us up!" The dragon responded, pumping his wings, rising. Higher and higher they climbed, until the air thinned and the city fell away in a haze. The stars were clearer up here, pinpricks of cold light. Rhaegal followed. Daenerys urged him on with hands and knees, her body almost flat against his neck. Her hair whipped behind her like a comet's tail. The dragons met again, higher than they had ever fought before. Drogon Dove, using his greater bulk to his advantage, slamming into Rhaegal from above. They locked together, tumbling, snapping, claws tearing at wings and bellies. Jon heard men shouting far below, saw flashes of fire as stray gouts of flame scorched roofs. But most of their fury was turned on each other. This is madness, Jon thought, clinging to Drogon's spine. This is what the Maesters wrote of. This is how it ends. He remembered the melted throne. He remembered the stories of dragons fighting dragons until only bones remained. Not this time, he thought fiercely. He shifted his weight, crawling inch by inch up Drogon's neck. The wind tore at him, trying to fling him off into the darkness. He ignored it. Rhaegal's head loomed, jaws snapping inches away. Jon could see the lines of old scars along his snout, the way one I didn't quite focus right. He could smell the stench of brimstone on his breath. "Drogon!" Jon shouted. "Hold him!" The black dragon roared and twisted, locking his foreclaws around Rhaegal's shoulders, grappling him in a deadly embrace. They fell together, spinning, wings snapped half-closed. The city rushed up toward them. Jon didn't care. He could see her now. Daenerys clung to Rhaegal's neck, eyes wide, hair whipped wild. Her fingers dug into the dragon's spikes. She was close enough that he could see the lines around her mouth, the sheen of sweat on her upper lip. "Daenerys!" he yelled. Her gaze snapped to him. "Let go!" he shouted. "Call him off, before we both fall, before we burn them all. It doesn't have to end like this." "You say that," she shouted back, "every time you stand in my way." Her eyes were raw, her voice tore with the wind. "And every time you make it worse." She reached for something at her belt. For an instant, Jon thought she had somehow brought another horn. Then he saw the glint of steel. She drew a short spear, its point gleaming with a sickly sheen. Dragonglass, he realized a split second before she hurled it. He tried to duck, to drag himself flat against Drogon's neck. The spear flashed between them. It did not hit him. It struck Drogon. The point sank into the dragon's shoulder, just behind where Jon's knee pressed. Drogon screamed, a sound of purest agony. His body convulsed. The world inverted. They tumbled. Sky and city and sea spun around them in a nauseating whirl. Jon clung with everything he had, fingers digging into scales, nails tearing. His stomach lurched. He heard Regal's roar, distant now, and Daenerys shouting something he could not make out. Drogon's wings snapped wide, then crumpled, one side not responding properly. The dragonglass spear had cut deep, severing something vital in the wing joint. They fell. Wind tore at Jon, ripping the breath from his lungs. His heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed his forehead against Drogon's neck. I'm sorry, he thought, though whether to the dragon or to the world, he could not say. Then the impact came. It was like being struck by a mountain. Drogon hit the far side of the Blackwater Rush, just beyond the city walls, in a spray of mud and water. The river frothed under the massive weight, waves surging outward. Trees toppled, stones shattered. Jon flew. He tore free of Drogon's neck, his grip finally giving. For an instant, he was weightless, flung through the air like a rag. The river rose up to meet him. Cold swallowed him. The world went dark. He woke to pain. It was a diffuse, all-over ache at first, the kind that came from being smashed against something larger and harder than oneself. Then more specific complaints made themselves known. His ribs throbbed in time with his heartbeat. His left leg screamed when he tried to move it. His hand felt as if it had been dipped in fire and then rolled in broken glass. He coughed. Water forced its way out of his lungs in a hacking rush. He rolled onto his side, gagging, spitting river and bile into reeds. Easy, a voice said. Easy, lad. You're not drowning now, no matter how much you sound like it. Hands turned him gently onto his back. He blinked up into a face lined like old leather, with a beard more gray than black and eyes that held the steady patience of someone who had watched too many storms. Davos, Jon croaked. Davos Seaworth said. You've a talent for falling from great heights into cold water. I'm starting to think you do it just to see if I can fish you out. Jon tried to sit up. His body screamed. He hissed and fell back, panting. Stay down, Davos said. You've a cracked leg, at least one broken rib, and half your skin looks like it's been introduced to a cheese grater. There'll be time for heroics later. The dragons, Jon gasped. Drogon, Daenerys. Davos's expression shuddered briefly. Drogon's over there, he said, nodding toward a massive dark shape a little way downriver. Jon turned his head. Drogon lay half in the water, half on the bank, his body twisted at an ugly angle. One wing was crushed beneath him, the other sprawled out, membrane torn in several places. Mud and blood caked his scales. His eyes were closed. He did not move. No, Jon whispered. No, no. He was breathing when we pulled you out, Davos said quickly. Slow, but there. We couldn't get close enough to do much. His tail kept lashing. Nearly took poor Tom's head off. But he settled some after he heard you. Heard me? Jon repeated dully. Davos's mouth twitched. You kept shouting his name, even when you were under the water. I don't know how you managed it. Stubbornness, I suppose. Jon closed his eyes. He reached inwardly for the strange thread that had always been there since he first touched Dragonscale. It was frayed now, thin, but it was not broken. He felt pain, deep and pervasive, radiating through a body not his own. He felt confusion and a heavy, dragging weariness. He felt an echo of falling, falling, falling. He felt a hesitant response to his reaching, a flicker of recognition, distant but present. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He's alive, he said. For now, Davos agreed. He's in no state to be flying to anyone's rescue, though, or burning anything more dangerous than the occasional fish. Jon forced his eyes open again. Daenerys? He asked. Davos's jaw tightened. She flew off, he said. Regal caught himself before he hit, the scaly bastard. He's wounded, though. There's a tear in one wing. They limped away east, over the bay. We tried a few half-hearted shots with the scorpions, but the angle was poor and He shrugged. I wasn't keen on killing her where half the city could see it and half could swear we tried. You should have, Jon said. His voice was dull. The words tasted like ash. You should have killed her when you had the chance. Maybe, Davos said. Maybe not. Hard to say when you're not the man pulling the trigger. I've had my fill of deciding who lives and dies. I'll leave that to kings and dragons. Kings, Jon muttered. I keep telling you. Yes, and the more you say it, the less anyone believes you, Davos said. You rode a dragon over their heads and fell from the sky fighting their enemies. Whatever else you do, they'll remember that. He sighed. The city's in one piece. Mostly. Few fires. Fewer than there might have been if you hadn't taken that spear instead of Drogon's heart. The men are inspired, I suppose, or terrified. Hard to tell the difference at night. Jon let his head fall back into the damp reeds. The stars wheeled slowly overhead. His body throbbed in time with the distant crash of the river against its banks. Will she come back? He asked after a moment. Oh, Davos said. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But she will. She's not the giving up sort, that one. And now she knows you'll meet her in the sky as long as you can draw breath. And if I can't? Jon asked. If Drogon can't? Then we fight the way we always have, Davos said. With men and steel and bad food and too little sleep. Dragons aren't the only thing that wins wars. If they were, the world would have burned long ago. He patted Jon's shoulder, careful of the bruises. In the meantime, he said, you're going to rest. The Maester will want to look at you, and Drogon, and half the men on the walls. The city doesn't need you falling on your face in front of them. Save that for the next time you take a spear to the sky. Jon closed his eyes. He dreamed, feverish and fitful, of falling endlessly, of dragons circling one another above a sea of fire, of a melted throne sinking into molten stone. The war dragged on. It became, as wars often do, not a series of grand battles but a long, grinding attrition. Daenerys struck where Jon was weakest, avoiding the capital now that she knew scorpions and dragon and men's loyalty might all turn against her there. She raided supply trains, burning wagons and grain and leaving men alive to tell the tale. She harried the outskirts of his allies' lands, scorching fields and terrifying peasants, then vanishing into the clouds before Drogon, still healing, could rise to meet her. Rhaegal grew more erratic. The wound in his wing mended poorly, leaving a ragged edge that made his flight lopsided. The horn's damage lingered. There were moments when he froze in midair, wings faltering, only Daenerys' desperate skill keeping them from plunging. At other times, he fell into wild frenzies, belching fire at shadows, his eyes glazed. Daenerys rode him still. She took to binding herself more securely to his back, with straps and ropes. There were days when she did not dismount at all, eating and even sleeping curled against his neck as he glided through the sky. She came down to speak to lords and terrorize villages, then up again before any could think to lay a trap. In the Riverlands, a village that had sworn for Jon found itself the target of one of her rages. A dozen homes burned, their ashes mingling with the charred bodies of those who had tried to flee too slowly. She left one man alive, face half melted, to crawl to the nearest holdfast with a message. Bend the knee to your queen or this is what awaits. Some did. Others gritted their teeth and sent word to Jon, asking when his dragon would come. Drogon recovered slowly. He would never fly as he once had. The dragonglass spear had done its work too well. One wing carried a stiffness that made sharp turns dangerous. Long flights left him exhausted, but he could still rise. He flew best in short, brutal bursts like a wounded hawk that could still strike if it chose its moment. Jon learned to choose. He and Tyrion and Davos and Sansa, when she came south to sit at his council table with eyes like sharpened ice, pored over maps. They guessed where Daenerys would strike next, based on old grudges and new opportunities. They misguessed as often as they guessed true, but every time they met her, in sky or on ground, the shape of the war shifted. Arya was a ghost in all of this. She moved through camps and castles like smoke, listening in places few thought to watch. She slipped into taverns where soldiers drank and swaggered, where merchants grumbled, where small folk cursed dragons and kings and prayed to any god that would listen. Once, she came within an arrow's flight of Dragonstone. She sat on a black rock outcropping, salt spray wetting her boots, and watched Regal circle the castle. Even from a distance, she could see his uneven flight, the way he favored one wing. She could have taken a shot. Her hand tightened around the bow she held, knuckles whitening. The arrow in her fingers was tipped with dragonglass, black and dull. She imagined the shot, the arc, the wind, the slight curve of the dragon's path. She had killed a king before, in a hall flooded with smoke and blood. Killing a queen from the sky would be no different in the end. Just another name on a list. She lowered the bow. Not like this, she thought. Not where no one would see. This isn't a faceless man's kill. This is something else. She watched instead. She saw Daenerys atop the dragon's back, small and fierce, hair braided, shoulders squared. She saw her posture, the tension, the exhaustion. She saw, she thought, the same stubbornness she recognized in her sister and her brother. When she went back to King's Landing, she told Jon nothing of how close she had been. What she did tell him, she told quietly, in the Godswood he had ordered planted in a small courtyard, stubbornly insisting that there be one tree in this cursed city that remembered the North. She's not happy, Arya said, even when she burns things, especially not then. Jon looked at the sapling, its pale leaves barely rustling in the soft breeze. She thinks it's the only way. Arya shrugged. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The thing about people who think there's only one way to do anything, they're usually wrong. And dead, eventually. You think she'll stop? He asked. No, Arya said. I think she'll keep going until someone stops her. Her eyes, gray and unflinching, met his. You know who that someone's going to be. He did. He tried to pretend for a little while longer that it might be otherwise. In the end, it came down to a field. They chose it deliberately, though choosing anything in war is a matter of pushing gently at chaos and hoping it stumbles where you want. It lay halfway between King's Landing and Dragonstone, a broad stretch of scrub and low grasses, dotted with outcroppings of rock and a few lonely, stunted trees. To the west, the land rose toward low hills. To the east, it dipped toward the sea. Old, overgrown foundations hinted that there had once been a village here before some plague or band of raiders had erased it. Good sight lines, Davos said, squinting against the morning light. No cover to speak of. If she comes, we'll see her. If she comes, Tyrion said. If she chooses to meet us here rather than burn 3 other villages while we wait. She'll come, Sansa said. Her voice carried oddly in the open air. She wants him. Her gaze flicked to Jon, then away, as if looking at him too long might harden something she did not wish hardened. She wants the dragon, Sansa went on. She wants the story. If she kills him in front of half the lords of the realm, with both dragons overhead, she thinks no one will dare whisper his name again. And if he kills her? Arya asked. Then they will whisper hers, Sansa said. Either way, the songs are written. Jon shifted his weight. Drogon lay nearby, curled like a mountain of black stone. His eyes were half-lidded, his breathing slow and steady. He had flown at dawn, a short, cautious circuit over the assembled armies, to remind them who they followed. It had cost him much. He rested now, gathering strength. Jon could feel his own heart beating in echo to the dragons. He wore no crown. He had refused the circlet Sansa had brought south, saying a dragon on his shoulder was ostentation enough. He wore plain armor, dark and unadorned, with only a small direwolf on one pauldron and a 3-headed dragon on the other, a compromise that pleased no one and everyone. Around the field, banners snapped in the breeze. Wolves, trout, falcons, the sun and spear of Dorne, the tireless wheels of House Royce, the black fish of Tully. A scattering of banners from houses that had never mattered much in previous songs but had bled as fiercely as any. Blackwood, Manderley, Karstark reborn. Opposite them, as the morning wore on, other banners appeared on the horizon. Black and red, The three-headed dragon, stark and simple. A smaller host than Jon's, but hardened, experienced. Unsullied ranks in perfect lines. Dothraki riders in looser clumps, their braids rattling, their horses tossing their heads at the unfamiliar dampness of the air. A few Western lords who had cast their lot with fire, riding under battered sigils. And overhead, regal. His flight was slow and ungainly compared to what it had been, but he flew. His scarred wing caught the light in odd ways, ragged edges glowing briefly as the sun passed behind him. His roar was hoarser than Drogon's, but it rolled across the field with as much authority. Daenerys rode him. She guided him in a low circle over the assembled armies, letting them see her. There was no smile on her face, only an iron set to her jaw. Her armor caught the light. Her hair was braided back severely, no loose strands to whip free. She looked, Jon thought, like a statue carved to place atop a tomb. Regal came down in a long, sliding arc, landing with less grace than Drogon once had, but more than he had managed since the horn shattered. He shook himself, scattering dust. Daenerys dismounted. For a moment, no one moved. Then Jon stepped forward. He walked out from his lines, across the trampled grass, toward the space between the two armies. He felt the weight of every eye on him, from the lowest spearman to the highest lord. Halfway, he stopped. Drogon shifted behind him, then pushed himself to his feet. The black dragon moved forward slowly, each step deliberate. His injured wing dragged slightly, leaving a furrow in the earth. He came to stand just behind Jon, his head lowered but his eyes sharp, fixed on Regal. Daenerys approached in turn. Grey Worm walked at her side, armor mended but bearing scars. Behind them, a handful of men Jon did not know by name but recognized by type. Officers, advisors, loyalists. They stopped within speaking distance. The wind toyed with the edges of their cloaks. "Jon," Daenerys said. There was no "Your Grace," no title, just his name spoken like a memory. "Daenerys," he said. They looked at each other for a long moment. He saw the changes in her. The exhaustion etched into the lines around her eyes, the tightness around her mouth, the faint tremor in her hand. She saw, he thought, his own. The gray at his temples, the latest scar along his jaw, the way he shifted his weight to ease an old wound in his leg. "We could have met in a hall," she said. "In a city, at a council table. You wouldn't have come," he said. She considered, then inclined her head. "No," she said, "I wouldn't have." Silence stretched. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Turn back. Take your men, your dragon, and go east. There are cities there that would welcome you as a queen. Let Westeros find its own way." "You'd like that," she said. "To wash your hands of me, to pretend that sending me away is mercy." "It would be," he said, "for them, for you." Her eyes flashed. "Mercy," she said. "You speak of mercy now, after you shattered my horn and half my army? After you set the realm on a path where only one of us will walk away?" "I set it on a path where neither of us would bind dragons with chains," he said. "Where we wouldn't use their pain to force them. Where we might have found another way." "You still think there was another way," she said. He hesitated. "I did," he said. "I wanted to. Maybe I still do. Somewhere, in some life we didn't live, maybe there was. But in this one," he looked around, at the banners, at the men, at the dragons. "In this one," he said, "we brought them here." Her nostrils flared. "I offered you another way once," she said. "I asked you to stand beside me. You chose to stand against me instead. Don't pretend you're the only one who tried to save us from this." He almost said, "I loved you." He didn't. "I know," he said instead. The wind shifted. Regal growled, a low, rumbling sound. Drogon answered with a hum of his own. The two dragons eyed each other across the space, their mental voices, if there were such things, pressing against each other like invisible fronts. "They will not stop," Daenerys said. "Even if we walk away, they smell blood. They know this is not finished." "Then let it end with us," Jon said. Not with them. Her eyes narrowed. What do you mean? You and me, he said. In the sky. Away from them. Away from this. He gestured to the armies. We fly out over the sea. We meet there. No horns. No scorpions. No men with spears. Just us and our dragons. And we end it. She stared at him. You would risk that, she said slowly. You would trust me not to burn your army the moment you leave them? You're here, he said. So am I. So are they. He nodded toward the assembled lords. The realm is watching. Whatever we do now, they'll tell the story for 100 years. Maybe 1,000. If we turn this field into a slaughterhouse with dragons overhead, there might not be much realm left to tell anything. And if I accept? She asked. If I fly with you over the sea, what then? Only one of us will come back. Maybe, he said. Maybe neither of us does. Her chin lifted. Is that what you want? To die, as some martyr, while your sister rules in your place and the songs paint you better than you were? I want it to stop, he said. I want children to stop waking in the night to the sound of wings. I want the next generation to have tales of dragons as something that happened once, a long time ago, and not as something that burned their homes. She looked at him for a long moment. You would kill Drogon, she said. To make that happen. He swallowed. If I have to, he said. If it's the only way. Pain flickered across her face, quickly hidden. And you'd expect me to do the same to Regal, she said. To my last living tie to home, to my house, to everything I've lost. He did not answer. You are asking me to give up everything, she said. Again. For them. She nodded toward the armies, toward the banners. For men and women who spat on my father's name, who laughed when we were driven into exile, who would have left me to die in a wasteland if I hadn't taken what I took. I'm asking you, he said, to be better than them. She smiled. It was a small, sad smile. I wanted to be, she said, once, when I was a girl, when I thought the world could be remade by cutting a few chains and lighting a few pyres. But the world doesn't want better, John. It wants power. It respects only that. She looked past him at Drogon. He chose you, she said. Maybe he saw something I didn't. Or maybe he simply chose the blood that hadn't already burned half a continent. Either way, he chose. She drew in a breath. Very. Well, she said. Over the sea. Just us and our dragons. We ended there. Behind her, Grey Worm shifted. Your Grace. She held up a hand. He fell silent, jaw clenched. John's heart hammered. He nodded. Drogon shifted behind him, as if sensing the shape of the decision. His wings rustled, the injured one moving more stiffly. You're sure? Tyrion murmured when Jon came in earshot on his way back. No, Jon said. But I don't see another way. Tyrion's mouth twisted. There are always other ways, he said. But they may be worse. If this is what you've chosen, I'll stand by it. Just don't make a habit of throwing yourself off dragons into rivers. It's getting old. Davos clasped Jon's arm. You come back, you hear? He said gruffly. Or I'll go to whatever afterlife you end up in and drag you back myself. Arya said nothing. She simply hugged him, quick and hard, then stepped back. Her eyes were dry. Sansa looked at him for a long moment. You were never meant for peace, she said quietly. You were meant for this. I wish it were otherwise. I don't, he said. Not anymore. If this is what I'm meant for, at least I know what to do. She smiled, a little, through the tightness in her throat. Then do it, she said. He went back to Drogon. The dragon lowered his head, huffing hot breath over Jon's face. Jon rested his hand on the warm scales, feeling the thrum of life beneath. This is it, boy, he said softly. One more flight, one more fight, then rest. One way or another. Drogon rumbled, as if in agreement. Jon pulled himself up, muscles protesting, and settled into place between the dragon's shoulders. Across the field, Daenerys mounted Regal. They did not speak again. Two dragons, two riders, rose into the sky. The armies watched them go, men shading their eyes, mouths open. The wind carried 1,000 prayers in 36 tongues. They flew east, toward the sea. Beneath them, the land fell away. Fields gave way to cliffs, cliffs to rocky shore. The water stretched out, gray and restless, as far as the eye could see. They flew until the land was a faint smudge at their backs. Then they turned to face each other. The sea below heaved, indifferent. Rhaegal hovered, wings beating steady, though Jon could see the strain in the set of his muscles. Daenerys sat straight and tall on his back, her hair whipping around her like a halo of white flame. Drogon's breath came harsher. The wounds he carried had never truly healed, but there was a steadiness in him Jon had not seen before, a determination that went beyond instinct. They regarded each other across a gap of sky. "Last chance," Jon called, voice breaking on the wind. "Fly away." She shook her head. "I crossed half the world to get here," she shouted. "I won't leave it in your hands. Not when I've seen what you do with power you don't want." "Then this is it," he said. "Yes," she said. "This is it." She leaned forward. "Rhaegal Dove." Drogon answered. They met in the air with a sound like the world breaking. Fire burst between them, an incandescent shockwave that turned the air to glass and the sea below to steam. Claws tore at scales. Teeth snapped inches from flesh. Jon clung, shouting wordless encouragement, commands lost in the roar. He could have tried to call Drogon off, to direct him away, to pull punches. He didn't. He let the dragon fight. Rhaegal latched onto Drogon's neck again, jaws closing on an old scar. Blood spurted, black and smoking. Drogon roared and twisted, wrenching free, and raked Rhaegal's belly with his hind claws. Green blood fell, hissing where it hit the sea. Daenerys clung like a limpet, her body moving with Rhaegal's. She shouted something that might have been words or just raw sound. Drogon slammed his bulk against Rhaegal's side, forcing him down. They plunged together, locked in a deadly embrace. The ocean rose up. At the last moment, Rhaegal wrenched himself free, wings flaring. Drogon slammed into the water. The impact sent a geyser of foam skyward. Jon's teeth rattled. For a terrifying instant, everything was cold and dark and churned. Drogon's body fought instinctively, limbs thrashing. He kicked off the sea floor with powerful strokes, his wings dragging through the water like sails. They broke the surface, gasping. Rhaegal stooped, fire spilling from his jaws. The flames hit the water, sending up clouds of steam. They licked at Drogon's back, searing scales already battered. "Up!" Jon shouted, coughing. "Up!" Drogon surged skyward, panting, water pouring off him. His wings beat hard, each stroke a visible effort. Rhaegal came at them again. This time, Drogon met him head-on. They collided, teeth closing, claws digging. Their roars blended into one continuous scream. Jon felt something crack, somewhere deep in Drogon's chest. He felt pain stagger the dragon. He felt through their bond and understanding. This was the end. He met Daenerys' gaze across the chaos of claws and wings. There was no hatred in it, only a deep, exhausted sorrow. "I'm sorry," he shouted. "So am I," she shouted back. He didn't see which dragon's fire did it. He only knew that suddenly, impossibly, the world was full of heat and light. Flames wrapped around them like a lover's embrace, hot and terrible. He felt his hair singe, his eyebrows vanish, his skin scream. He clung to Drogon until there was nothing left to cling with, until the world was only fire and falling and the sound of dragons dying. They found wreckage on the shore for days. Burned bones, some impossibly large, some heartbreakingly small. Charred scales that still held a ghost of color. Blackened stone where the heat had fused sand into glass. They never found Jon's body. They never found Daenerys's either. Some said the dragons had taken them, in their last moments, diving deep into the sea with their riders still clutched tight, to rest in the cold dark where no songs reached. Others said they had been burned to ash, scattered on the wind. In King's Landing, a council was formed. Sansa Stark came south again, this time with no brother to defer to. She sat at the head of the table in the melted throne room, the remnants of the Iron Throne still twisted behind her like a warning. Tyrion stood at her right hand, Davos at her left. Samwell Tarly, summoned from the citadel with his arms full of books, blinked at the enormity of his new duties. Lords and ladies who had survived took their places, some grudgingly, some with relief. "We can fight about titles later," Sansa said, silencing an argument over who should be king or queen or first among equals. "What matters now is that we do better than the ones who came before. Jon died trying to stop this war from burning the world. Daenerys died trying to claim a home she never had." She looked at each of them in turn. "Let's not waste their deaths." "We can't know they're dead," Sam protested softly. "No," Sansa agreed. "We can't. But we can't wait for them to come back, either. We've done enough waiting for men and women with dragons to save or doom us. It's our turn." In the north, Arya stood on the battlements of Winterfell and looked south, toward a horizon that held no fire. She smiled, just a little, and turned her eyes west instead, toward the unknown. On quiet nights, when the wind was right, the people of Westeros swore they could hear something in the distance. Not the roar of a dragon, but a softer sound. Like the sigh of great wings folding, finally, to rest. In time, the tales grew. They spoke of the Dragon War, when two dragons fought above the sea and fell together, breaking the last hold of fire on the world. They spoke of a king who never wore a crown and a queen who burned too hot for the world that birthed her. They spoke of a day when the sky was so bright with flame that even the blind felt it. And they spoke of the choice that began it all. Of a dragon who, in a shattered square, turned his head away from a city and lowered it instead to a man who did not want a throne. Drogon chose him, they said, and in choosing, he forced the realm to decide what it would be without dragons. For the first time in a long time, the answer, even with all its flaws and wars and grief, belonged to men.